in the vestibule of hell, in a memory of 3 visits to Morocco. We started our adventure with Morocco in Marrakesh, where we landed at noon. A quick look at the exchange rates, buying a SIM card, and after a while we set off the CTM bus to our hotel, this time located just outside the walls of the Medina, inside the pink walls of the city from the 10th century. After reaching the place and receiving a room, we entered the hotel diner. The place didn't look very trustworthy. The staff nodded at our every sentence, but we quickly realized that they had no idea what we were talking about. There were no local inside yet, which convinced us to take a table. We got more food than we wanted. It was tasty and no stomach upsets. As I mentioned, overnight stay on the outskirts of the Medina, a quiet street which, however, turns into the madness of the old town after a few dozen steps. Scooters, motorbikes, people, bicycles, donkeys, hand carts, mini trucks, in a word, a real madness. And that's just the edge. We decided to spend the next morning as part of a peaceful acclimatization, and it was a good decision. Refreshments in the form of tagine, Moroccan salad, and lots of different additions. Mandatory tea with mint, twice as sweet as anything we drink every day, but still delicious. The waiter is nearly dressed all unobtrusive and very natural. The guests took their place at many tables. The supper was silent after 3/4 of an hour, which suited us very well due to the considerable fatigue. From the roof of the riad, we looked towards Janaya El Afna, where the official city event was taking place. There was a tumult of people, muffled by the distance fireworks. Looking from a distance, we are glad that we went there. The next day we started with a delicious breakfast, and in the morning, after the celebration of the Holy Mass in French, close to the Catholic Church, we set off to the Majoral Garden. Tickets bought online to avoid the queue on site, but it's worth having the currency of the place, the Moroccan dirham. It was a very good decision. Despite Sunday, the line of people to the cash register stretched for several dozen meters. The garden from the very entrance makes a great impression. We are flooded with natural greenery and holidays of colors, of buildings and paths. For us, the contrast was even greater because we had only been in the Medina so far. A mix of the smells of dust, motorcycle, fuel or donkey dropping turned into the smells of nature and Yaisel perfume in the toilet. There were a lot of tourists, but we didn't feel as overwhelmed by the crowd as, for example, in Park Güell in Barcelona. A lot of its employees walk around the complex. We are happy to answer various questions. Inside, we also visited the Berber's Museum. For travelers interested in the history of the visited places and the origin of the inhabitants, it will certainly be an interesting place. Next to the gardens, in the Museum of Yves Saint Laurent, the famous fashion designer, he was born in Oran, but the child of the French, and moved to Paris at the age of 17, where he developed his career working for Dior. At the peak of his career, he was drafted into the French army during the war with Algeria, seeking to free itself from colonial grip. a fashion designer, was rejected by his friends from the army. He was hospitalized, where he was awaited by strong drug, psychoactive and electroconvulsive therapy. Despite these life perturbations, he continued his career and later settled permanently in Marrakesh. Here too, in the gardens of Majorelle, his ashes were scattered. A very interesting place, not only for fashion fans. After the cultural experience, it was time for the souk, i.e. the market in the Medina. Along the way, we bought coffee and local sweets along the way. For those wondering about travelers' diary information, we ate everything and everywhere, fortunately without any adventures. The souk is the vestibule of hell. More and more people, and the number of motorbikes and donkeys moving between them does not decrease. On every side there are stalls full of everything that only man has produced. However, you can find a valuable souvenir among them, so it's worth looking for. It's hard to focus on the surrounding here, but it's worth a try, because the streets also hide cleverly integrated street art. If the Market Alice are the vestibule, the hell itself is, of course, Jemaya El Afna Square. So far, this is the craziest place we've been to. People, lots of people, snake charmers, food stalls, chained monkeys, false jaw sellers, donkeys, beaters, horse-drawn carriages. In addition, screams, music, and pipes coming from all sides. It's all seasoned with all the sin we know. Because of my clothes, we heard calls from every store. Such places are too intense for us, but of course, we couldn't afford to go into the middle of this mess. A Moroccan from our riad warned us not to eat at this stall because of them no fresh food. But whatever, how could we not use the services of the famous stand number 14 and other ones? It's worth going in for a snack. For people who can stand the general commotion around them, found eaten it was worth it. Right after that, however, we escaped to more quiet streets. After such experiences, the motorbikes on the outskirts of the Medina were balm for our senses. We decided to have dinner by the road near the accommodation. Right after that, we escaped to bed, because the next morning we are starting a pre-order trip to the north of the country. But before I visit the famous Casablanca city, some information now for future tourists from Poland. Accommodation booked through booking.com cost 110 Polish zlotych person per day, including the climatic free payable on site. Overnight stay with breakfast and dinner. Food, falafel with hummus, hotel restaurant on a busy street on the outskirts of the Medina. A room with a curtain, just a time to relax with tea while walking around the souk. Lunch with harira with dates and lime. The next day, for the first time, I had the opportunity to participate in a trip organized in Moroccan land. I avoid them like the plague. The fact of being my own sailor, helm and ship is one of the greatest advantages of traveling on my own. But well, the financial aspects and the fear of the unknown won out in the desert. I will mention right away that fear is unjustified, although there was a moment of uncertainty. First things first. We bought the trip from Poland. For those interested, I put a short description of it. Atlas Mountains. Pick up from the indicated Riyadh in Marrakesh, transfer to Oasis with a tour of it, and the local carpet factory, transfer to the desert. Then, how did it look in practice? Pick up scheduled between 7 and 15 a.m. for 7:45 a.m. Finally, the driver showed up at 8 o'clock, which is quite on time. For the next hour, we gathered other participants from different places, which for me was quite annoying, but of course understandable. Bus for about 20 people, so the number of people is reasonable. A very international company, consisting of Englishmen, Frenchmen, Italians, Tunisians, Moroccans, Americans, Koreans, and us, Poles. Important information for each participant is that the distances in Morocco are not short, and the roads leading to the mountains are also not motorways. In addition, many of them are being built, which also slows down the journey. So for the next 3 hours, there is a bus ride. For me, it's quite pleasant, as I love to admire roadside villages and wonders of nature. The only inconvenience is the inability to stop in a place that arouses more curiosity. We had a few stops for a photo with a nice view, including the panorama of the Atlas Mountains, and for coffee and toilet. Places, of course, arranged, but in my opinion reasonable, both in terms of views and prices. Dinner was much less enjoyable. Restaurant with 5 types of menu to choose from, prices compared to portions and quality rather expensive. 135 mat per portion. Long wait and crowded place. We usually avoid this type of attractions like the plague. I said, of course, participation is not mandatory, but for lack of a better alternative, we ate. The area itself is a beautifully situated fortified settlement. After lunch, we continued our journey. The whole group turned out to be very disciplined. Another time we stopped for a photo at very interesting formed rock formations. Another stop at the oasis. After more than an hour of moving through a dried landscape full of dust and sand, we fell into the middle of a green crop of date palms, olives, and alfalfa. Water throughout the oasis is distributed through irrigation canals. The land was divided into small plots cultivated by the inhabitants, who exchange crops with each other. We are shown around the gardens by a Berber fluently changing languages from English to French and Spanish, weaving Italian and Polish words into it all. Later we went to a local carpet factory where we were shown the manual process of the production and the types were described. The whole thing, of course, is intended to encourage you to buy, although we did not feel much pressure. Before the desert itself, there was one more point of the route, the gorge of the river flowing through here. In fact, it stretches for several kilometers and its walls can be up to 400 meters high. It is a perfect place for fans of climbing. We were going up using the ladder. Due to the proximity of the base of the wall, daredevils can be observed with the unaided eye basically from the street. Of course, it's hard to compare to, for example, admiring the legendary El Capitan in the Yosemite Valley, but the views are still impressive. Climbing was short. Then, without stopping, we went to the sands of the desert. We made our way back to our bus. After a while, a Moroccan man approached us, with whom we could not communicate in any language, even in sign language. We had a hard time. In this ignorance, it drove us in complete darkness through the sands of the desert for over an hour, stopping from the time to time at lonely buildings and talking to the locals. We, without mobile network coverage and in total ignorance of the end of this journey inside, began to wonder about its safety. Fortunately, the whole thing ended where it had to, i.e. on the outskirts of Marrakesh. We started the new day by choosing the direction to other side of the Morocco, because we had to travel by train from Marrakesh to Casablanca on the Atlantic Ocean, from which we had a return ticket. In this case, also tickets bought online, https www.cncfvoyages.ma using Revolut. Presenting the ticket on the phone, it was checked when going to the platform and during the route. The train was basically full, but the seats are numbered and assigned when booking the ticket. Someone was sitting on ours, but when he showed up, he did not have any problem and got up. Sample price: Casablanca Marrakesh 138 MAD. Percent in Casablanca. I started with exploring the market streets. Everything is here, but everything seems to be mixed in a slightly calmer from no motorized vehicle pass us every now and then. You can only expect a donkey carrying leather or accompanying gentlemen cleaning the streets. In this respect, modernity is mixed with tradition. Goods are transported on various types of wheelbarrows or carts. There are no insistent calls from shops, although the second of our interest will not be missed by vigilant sellers. As we move towards the Atlantic Ocean, we enter less and less touristy areas, moving into the world of fruit, vegetables, spices, and meat trade. As lover of local markets, visiting such places on every trip, we immersed ourselves in these wonderful festivities of colors. Walking around the old town, we passed by the Lord several times with a large pot of snail decoction. We also passed this dish, the uncooked version, trying to save itself by running away. As connoisseurs of all kinds of dishes, we could not give ourselves such attractions. Snails are picked out of their shells with a toothpick. The ones we tasted were made in a very peppery broth, and the whole taste reminded us of Polish tripe. During the walk, we found a well-arranged shop with soaps and organ oil, liquid Moroccan gold. A moment later, we climbed onto the roof of one of the cafes, to which we were once again encouraged by the local hanging out there. To make matters worse, we were constantly woken up all night by the noise in the street. They weren't party noises, but rather communal noises, garbage collection, cleaning, and so on. So it's hard to blame them, but left us with mixed feelings. In the morning, we got back in the CTM, this time, as I said, returning from Casablanca to Marrakesh. Well, in turn, we decided to go beyond its borders, but returning to Casablanca. Plus, we are craving beer. In one of the streets, we found a local bar where you could easily buy a beer for 40 MAD, expensive. Plus, the place itself had a weird brothel feel to it. After resting on the grass, it was time to hit the coast and enjoy the view of the ocean as the sun set. On the beach you could see boys playing football with a technique that didn't let us be surprised by Morocco's fourth place in the 2022 World Cup. Right after the ocean, we moved to the vicinity of the famous Hassan II Mosque. From this place, you can look at the neighboring beautiful asphalt roads, and the streets are very charming. We decided to end the day by train, as I said, as you already know, with a return trip to Marrakesh. Walking from the station on the main street, it was still so crowded in Marrakesh that a human jam formed. In addition, sellers shouted to the heavens praising their products, and muezzin passionately called for prayer. It was such an intense story for us that we decided to buy some takeaway food and spend the rest of the evening at the hotel. I have already mentioned the dishes. Tagine, this dish can be found literally everywhere and in every possible version. A tagine is primarily a clay vessel with a special conical lid. It is used for slow cooking of ingredients enclosed in it. It can be anything: meat, fish, vegetables. Harira, a soup derived from Berber cuisine. It is made of meat with the addition of lentils or other legumes, plus, of course, vegetables and herbs. Sometimes served with dates and lime, which definitely diversify the whole dish. Moroccan Berber tea, then Moroccan whiskey, a distinctive tea with plenty of sugar and mint, preferably fresh. It tasted great, even though we don't like very sweet drinks. The pouring process itself is a show. It is done from as high as possible so that it forms properly. Brochettes, it's meat skewers. Basically any type of meat. Snails, we got basically a decoction with snails inside. Snails eaten straight from the shell with toothpicks. Drinkable decoction, strongly peppery. My stay in Marrakesh lasted a week, and I tried to signal my reader the wealth of Arab culture. It is impossible to tell everything about it. You really have to see it for yourself. In the meantime, I cordially greet you, because we have reached the end of the relationship. Here I will only say that the time will come to tell a story about my Mediterranean travels to Italy, Spain, France, Greece and Turkey, but more on that in the next post.